Your attention, please. Paul and Alex are required to proceed to the gate immediately.
What?
No way.
What is happening here?
This is the last call for the Layovers podcast.
Really?
Come on, man. This is our thing. We got this.
Oh, yeah.
And we made it.
Of course, geeks.
Flight 57 to Incheon. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Paul. How are you? Greetings from sunny California.
Yeah, like we said in the last episode, I am in London. It's 5 p.m. and you're in California, which is very early in the morning.
Not too bad. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. It's an absolutely beautiful day. So this is fun. We've done this in the past. We know it works. So actually, the technology doesn't change, or the arrangement doesn't change. It's just the time zones, really.
Yeah, and the kind of drink you can have whilst recording it.
That's very true. That's a very good point.
You're still on coffee. We'll talk about your travels and how you got there a little bit later on the show. I was in Seoul just last week, which is why we chose that airport. We'll talk about it at the end of the show, but I can already reveal that I've flown the 747-8I.
Finally, you've done it.
Twice. I'll let you know the story as well. Quick shout out at the beginning. We received a shout out from someone on Instagram for once, Tyler Mixa, who wrote, listening to the KIX episodes of Layover at KIX.
Oh, that's cool.
Shout out to Alex and Paul for an awesome podcast. So there you go. You'll be there in the fall, so you'll be able to discover the airport we mentioned in the last episode. But thank you so much, Tyler. That's really cool of you to have that kind of shout outs. Since we are in the US, because you are in the US, of course, what everybody talks about every time we talk about the US is the fight between the US airlines and the Middle Eastern ones. Qatar Airways is buying a big stake from American Airlines. This is pretty staggering.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of those things that I think we're going to hear a lot more of, because it was not a hostile acquisition, but unsolicited, I think, is probably the best way to put it. It happened. Didn't it happen during the recent IATA conference?
Yeah, I think it was. Indeed, yes. I mean, that was the announcement. So the stakes haven't been bought yet. Qatar Airways has disclosed it wants to buy stakes. At first, it was 3.5% of American Airlines stakes. I've read 2 days ago that this increased to 4.5%. But the long-term goal will be to buy 10% of American Airlines. So that is a big one. That I think even 3.5% was about like $800 million. So we're not talking about small, pocket change here.
And this was not particularly welcome news to Doug Parker, who's the CEO of American Airlines. He responded in quite a reticent manner, saying, I think you referred to it as unfortunate or something like that. That was sort of like, we don't know where this is coming from. We're not massively enthusiastic. But of course, anybody can buy these shares. They're on the stock market. So if Al Baker and Qatar can find willing sellers, then they can do whatever they want. And it does put American in a slightly weird position, because they are an alliance member. They're both in one world. And that type of infusion of cash would not go amiss. And we have to say, before I'll preface what I'm about to say by saying this, of the major U.S. carriers, American has been the least vocal against the ME3, but they have not been silent in this fight. So it's just super awkward, right? And I think it's a massive ego play. Not ego. That's not true. It's just a confidence move by Al Baker saying, we're going to come and buy you. You know that, right? I love it. I love him. I don't always agree with him, but I think, he is the kind of character that you could not write a better script for if you tried. He's just hilarious. And this is just another typical move that you'd see in House of Cards or something.
I love him. He looks, some of these comments are like these owners of Formula One team racing stuff. Like they always like outrageous. But that's why we love him, honestly, for all controversial he can be. And you were right. You mentioned that the CEO of AA basically learned about that news whilst he was attending the conference. It was not even something that he got from a back channel. He learned the news as we were all learning about it at the same time.
So exactly, and it's unusual. Usually these type of deals are struck in back rooms during these types of conferences, and everybody does a big handshake at the end. But this was not one of those deals. This is very hilarious to me.
But at the same time, it makes maybe sense for Qatar because with all the problems they're having currently, so the ban around them is still up, so they have issues. So they have to basically maybe find other ways to actually make money. So that's why
I think it's very clever, and I think they've already managed to do a good job of getting value from the relationship with IAG and Heathrow. And that's been a reciprocal payment. In fact, it was weird when we flew out of Heathrow on Thursday, seeing like 8 or 9 Qatar Airways A320s at T5 as well. So BA are already benefiting from that relationship. So, but as you said, this is not a done deal yet. It'll take a lot of time and, of course, obviously money. So it'll be interesting to see. But I love this story already.
Yeah. About this story of Qatar having issues because of the ban around them, this interesting tidbit of Qatar Airways canceling A350 that were nearing completion. And when I say nearing completion, I think 2 out of the 4 were already having their seats being put in. There's a clause in the contract when they buy Airbus aircraft that says that if a plane is delayed by too long, they can actually act on this clause and say we don't want them, and this is exactly what they've done. I don't think it's a case of them changing their mind about the 350. No. I think it's a case of them having to reduce the number of flights currently because of the situation they're enduring, thus canceling the orders they can. And that, sadly, is these 4 aircraft from Airbus, because they need aircraft. And Al Baker has been super vocal about Airbus being bad at delivering the aircrafts on time. So it's an interesting play, because it seems that Qatar Airways is playing it as Airbus, you're being bad, you're not delivering on time. But at the same time, the reality is we don't have enough capacity right now. We'd rather not have these planes on our hands.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a welcome relief to them to be able to cut the cord on these, given the situation that they're in. Because from what I can see, this situation isn't going to end anytime soon. So having those off the books is probably a welcome relief. And, that clause is a sensible one. And Airbus haven't had the best track record. And I think with the backlog for some of the seat and interior manufacturers as well, just compounding this issue, getting them off the books is probably not a bad thing at all for them at this phase. But it will be very interesting. I think I read somewhere, and it might have been some armchair CEOing on airliners, but that Delta might pick those orders up. But again, like you said, 2 of them are pretty much done, so there's a lot of work to go into de-completing them, I guess, if you will. But it'll be interesting to see who picks them up, or if they just wait or defer them. But these were cancellations, not deferrals.
Since you just mentioned Delta, let's go there. The video that Delta released to their employees, basically telling that, bad Middle Eastern carriers, bad getting subsidies, bad, raging for 8 minutes. Did you see it?
Yeah. One of the cringiest things I've ever seen. It was just this blatant propaganda. It was supposed to be an internal employee video, but they actually put a press release out about it, which is, by definition, not internal. And it was so cheesy and cringy. And I in my always diplomatic way on Twitter said that if they'd spent as much money on this video, instead applied those funds to, I think I said, de-shitifying their passenger experience, then they might be able to compete. But what a waste of time. What a waste of time. Everybody I think knows my stance on this, and it's not binary. It's not black and white, but this is silly. This is silly.
Nah, we are not, but we are. I mean, for anyone who has listened to our show since the beginning knows that we are pro-competition, anti-subsidy. But in that case, we also say that subsidy is pretty much a kind of subsidies are supposedly being accused of. Most of them, the US airlines got them as well. Anyway, long debate. You can just re-listen to most of our first year of shows and you'll have our stance on that one. The other news, since we're talking about the Middle East, the rumor that FlyDubai might be merging with Emirates.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one. Have you ever flown FlyDubai yourself?
No, I haven't.
It's not the same quality. And when I say quality, don't misread me. I'm talking the planes. I'm sure as good and as safe as the ones from Emirates, but it's not the same play. It's not a high-end product. It's a middle-end product, if you'd like. It could make sense because Emirates is still expanding, still receiving aircrafts, but they might want to have a play which is more local without having to use 380s to go next door. And they might have to also have maybe lower costs by integrating an airline that is known to have lower costs, which is FlyDubai. Of course, the issue would be that How do you merge them? Do you actually merge the brand as well? Do you keep them separate? Because they really clearly are different products. You do not expect the quality of service, the quality of the passenger experience when you board a FlyDubai plane than when you board Emirates. So that's the big question mark. It's still a rumor, but it could make sense.
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, Tim Clark has come out and said that they are working to bring them together in the next 18 months in some capacity. But as you say, that the specifications for that integration have not been defined yet. And I didn't know, and I don't think I still know the relationship as it is today between those two carriers. I know that Emirates has a stake in FlyDubai, but I wasn't sure how integrated they were, how much oversight the Emirates executive team have over FlyDubai. I know there was a lot of scrutiny over FlyDubai after their incident in Russia when they lost a hull due to I think it was a third or fourth attempt to land during bad weather, and the pilots were
we talked about
fatigued and all of that, and there was a lot of scrutiny on their practices there. But as you say, I think that otherwise they seem to be a very good outfit. So that'll be interesting to see. I think the strategic aim of the integration is to free up some slots at the existing Dubai and future Dubai airports for Emirates. So it makes sense. Tim Clark is a master. So, he's got clearly a lot of thought has gone into this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we'll keep monitoring this one, but it could actually make sense a lot since we're talking Emirates. Emirates, Etihad, and Turkish do not have to endure the laptop ban anymore. That's great news. The first one to have been freed of the laptop ban when flying to the US was Etihad. I think it was about 10 days ago. Then Emirates just behind, and Turkish. So it's the reason why is a bit muddy, because when I read the first news about Etihad, it said that the airport in Abu Dhabi had increased its security capacity, thus was validated by the US to be able to fly laptops, etc. That's what they say, but when you read on the press release side of the US side, they don't actually mention it. So is it simply that they've actually done some increase in security? Is it simply that they've assessed the current security and said it was actually good enough? But that happened as well for Dubai Airport. We had said ourselves that at least for Dubai and Abu Dhabi Airport, we found that the ban was a bit too much, as in security in those airports is already very high. But it seems then that if you still fly with Turkish to the UK, you still have some kind of ban, but not to the US. So that's not completely clear now.
Yeah, it's been a developing story over the last few days as well, with Kuwait and Royal Jordanian also have been the latest airlines where the ban has been restricted. I was doing some reading on this morning, and I tried to find it, but there was I think it was an industry site, an airline industry site, that said that there wasn't actually anything to substantiate the claim in the first place, which is why you've seen this cascading removal of the ban so quickly. I wish I could find the source, but I kind of confirmed what we all suspected, that there wasn't a whole lot of substance to this ban, which is why it's been repealed so quickly. But as we've said time and time again on this show, when intelligence like this comes out, you feel compelled to give them the benefit of the doubt, even if it's a slight inconvenience to us as travelers as well. But it's nice to see this has been repealed. I think it makes everyone's life a lot easier, and one would hope ultimately safer.
There were also news that the laptop ban would not be expanded to other countries. So it's still in place for the countries that were not lifted for the ones we just mentioned, but it won't be expanded. I think we said last episode that there was not an expansion in Europe, but there were other countries in consideration in Southeast Asia, APAC, and other places in the world. For the moment, there's no expansion. So this is still very limited to a very few countries. It's still of much an inconvenience for them. But like you said, I mean, we were a bit sometimes angry about having this suspicion that parts of it was protectionism. Then again, as you say clearly as well, we're not, and nobody is actually fully aware of the security reasons on why they do that kind of stuff. And it's a bit sometimes just too easy to could. But I mean, at least it's going the right direction. Maybe simply these airports have increased security and matched what the US authorities wanted, and thus we are flying actually safer. Yeah. And if that's the case, well, good news for us, which also means that I'll have less of a issue trying to fly again Emirates to the US because I would have not tried it. Alex, I am sorry, but I have a delivery. Can you give me 5 minutes?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
go
thank
for it.
you.
Now I'm going to do what Paul did to me. In the last episode, Paul is going to get a delivery of probably some new electronic gadget that I will immediately envy. I kind of want to see what it is.
I'm back. Sorry.
No problem.
There you go. Still here?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I left
Plus
you a
it
little
was food, so
I left you a little Easter
I had to
egg
put
in
it
the
in the
audio as
fridge.
well.
Okay. I might actually leave it into the recording. We'll see. Where were I? I'm not sure, though, that in Dubai... Well, it could happen, actually. Have you seen that piece of news? I'm just going to read out loud the title. It was in The Atlantic. That time, the TSA found a scientist 3D printed mouse penis. The kind of stuff that has to go through security, I guess, sometimes. I mean, the article is about, what sometimes scientists have to carry with them,
Right.
which is obviously not standard. I mean, this is a fantastic article. Did you ever carry such things, Alex?
No, it has been a while since I've had to carry my mouse penis around, but yeah, I'm glad someone wrote this article. It needed to be written.
I will say something. I will admit something on this show. I think I know it was in Eastern Europe. I'm trying to remember which airport. I will remember maybe during this recording of the show. I had a microphone with me, one of these oblong microphone. And clearly it was on my carry-on. It was the time when we were trying to do some of these recordings on the go, and I was traveling and I had it with me. And clearly the guys at security thought it was a dildo.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I saw their faces. She was like blushing red and was like, "What is going on? What do I have in my bag, actually?" And then that was resolved. That was super funny, actually. We made a lot of jokes about that one. Talking about still in the Middle East, Dubai has this very special position with Emirates because they have this osmosis in what they can actually deliver to the passenger. A bit like some other airports, maybe Cathay in Hong Kong and maybe BA to some extent and Heathrow, but the symbiosis is even greater there, and they're trialing facial boarding. So, I mean, we had mentioned a few of these experiments in the past, so it would mean that as soon as you enter, I guess, the first security point, when you put your passport, you will have a photo taken of you, and that would lead you all the way throughout the plane without ever having to show neither your boarding pass or passport.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically one of the bottlenecks, right? If you can resolve the bottleneck of having to stop and show identification and show your boarding pass for the upteenth time, that can also deliver a more seamless passenger experience in airports. I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea as well. And you're right, that is the bottleneck, and I think it would speed up boarding exponentially. I wonder if they would have the same system that you discovered at, I can't remember if it was Heathrow or Gatwick that you discovered it, where they, you go through these automated passport machines, but then someone is still having to validate it on the back end. So I wonder how much of this is automated versus, but I don't think in all of the other places that I've experienced the passport gates that you have somebody else doing that. It might just be a CAA or something to do with the UK Border and Immigration Authority that mandates that. So I think this is great.
Yeah.
I'd love to see how it works.
Yeah, me too. I mean, this is one of the pain points in airports, and I think we will go one day into this science fiction scenario when as soon as you enter the airport, you recognize as Paul or Alex, and the camera is actually following you, is even scanning you to see if you have any forbidden objects on you, to see what kind of behavior you have, maybe even directing you, and that will freak out the privacy people, direct you to the right place to actually make some shopping, and then walk to the aircraft, a bit like we used to do maybe in the 50s, but simply this time we're having all these cameras and sensors around us, basically clinging us without having us to do anything about it.
I think, and we talked about this as well in a previous episode, maybe 20 episodes ago, about the security at airports in Tel Aviv in Israel, where they were starting to use this technology to detect threats passively almost. So I think what we're seeing here is the hybrid implementation of those technologies, less about threat detection, but not completely not about threat detection, and then trying to increase efficiencies in these areas that have been, as you say, pain points for literally decades.
And I don't think that we will see the expansion of those. Of course, there will be the privacy concerns, which are a big question mark because how much. But I don't think either we'll see the expansion of those as long as we don't have IATA standards, because or ICAO, because as long as you don't have standards, here we're talking about Emirates and Dubai. If you want the seamless integration of boarding passes, and as long as you don't have that worldwide with some kind of standard that allows like a seamless integration of all the systems together, we might only see experiments at some airports and not this diffusion of technology everywhere. It will take time, but I mean, maybe in our lifetime we'll see something.
Well, I think you're going to see it pretty quickly at places like Dubai for Emirates,
Correct.
where, you know, they're moving staggering numbers of people, of their own customers throughout what is essentially their own airport. Same perhaps with BA and T5, that's a great testing ground for these, where you've got a sort of closed audience of people that you can, you know, experiment with these processes.
I know that if you have a Skywards members card, the frequent flyer mile program, you can embed your data on it and thus access Dubai if you're on layover, or simply if you're going there, instead of using your passport, you go to a gate, you scan your card, which is your frequent miles card, and you get access to your country. I've not trialed it yet. We might try if we go to Dubai soon enough. We might both try it to see if we can actually enroll to that program. I think it's possible for 25 countries, and we're both in the list of countries. So we might actually try that. But again, that could only happen in Dubai because Skywards, you know, is Emirates' program. I don't think that Skywards would actually work in, you know, Houston or something.
No.
I will say I was checking in for my flight. That is tomorrow. I'm flying tomorrow to Hong Kong first in Manila. I'm using Emirates via Dubai. I'm stopping in Hong Kong, and then I'm catching a flight later on to Manila with Cathay Pacific. I bought it on Emirates' website. That's very interesting. So they really offer other airlines for the routes they're not doing. They have these interlining agreements. It's very interesting, and I will test that tomorrow and after tomorrow with the time zone difference. The thing is, I loved the check-in process of Emirates on their mobile app. It was really, really well done, but you can still see their glitches exactly because of what I said, because there's third party involved, and then they were struggling to check me in for that last bit for the Cathay Pacific, and I think that I will still have to go to the check-in counter tomorrow. But interesting that these are the airlines that are pushing a bit this idea of how easy it is to do the whole process, including checking in.
It's nice to see them and everybody pushing what we can do and trying to get as much done before one arrives at the airport as you can, so that you've got all of your boarding passes, or as many boarding passes as you can, which gives them a platform to deliver more and timely information to you as and when it's appropriate. So they may not have the gate for you, but at least they have the platform to deliver that information to you, because you've already checked in, and you know they can plan fueling better and catering and all of that, because a lot of us will have mentioned how many bags we're bringing and all of that. So I love to see airlines taking the lead on innovation for stuff. One would hope, and again, perhaps ICAO can facilitate this, that whatever discoveries they make, they can share some of them with other airlines to kind of help the traveling public enjoy the benefits of these experiments and not just keep them for themselves.
Yeah, you're right. I hope so. Talking about 380s, because Emirates, as we say constantly on this show, is one of the only companies that actually relies on 380s. As part of the expansion of Hong Kong Airport, which shall be tomorrow, so they're building a third runway. They had to increase actually the landing fees for that to finance that thing. They're building new parts of the terminal. They are building a massive sky bridge. So if you've ever been, guys, to Gatwick Airport, there's a sky bridge. So there's a path for passengers, and you are walking above the aircraft. Only that this one in Hong Kong will allow clearance for 380s.
It's very
cool. This is a pretty massive bridge.
It looks great. There's some great articles with the artist renderings on them. But the one at Gatwick, it looks very similar to that. But it's such a unique perspective.
Absolutely.
It's not very often where you get a chance to see a plane move underneath you like that. And the one at Gatwick can take 787s and 777s. I don't think it can take a 380, but yeah, it seems like a sensible solution to Hong Kong expansion need, and it really does need it, because as I mentioned in a previous episode, the experience right now is a little disjointed, but it sounds like they're going to resolve that with this major expansion program.
Yeah, which costs a lot of money. The one thing that is really good is that the main argument into building this is that they don't want to have shuttle buses. So they'd rather have us walk, which I also prefer, and having, of course, moving walkways instead of buses. I mean, I'm a staunch adversary to buses. I usually hate buses in all airports. So I'm very happy that Hong Kong is building this. We'll have to wait until 2020 to see this. So
that's pretty fast, though, isn't it?
Episodes. Yeah, well, look at what happens in Heathrow. We're still talking about a third runway, right?
Exactly.
Still, because we started with the Middle East, we'll stay in the Middle East. Etihad. This news came from Eric, a husband in tow. It's an interesting program. So Etihad, I've taken it a few times. Etihad already allows you to bid for upgrades. So you put an amount of money, you have a little slider, and you can say, I'm going to put $200, $600 to be upgraded to X, Y, and Z. And now they will offer, and I want your opinion on that because there's a lot of chatter about this. They want to offer you the possibility to bid on the fact that you won't have a passenger sitting next to you. So obviously that's for economy. But let's say you are 323 or 333, and you want to guarantee the fact that it'll be alone, you can bid to that fact. What do you think?
You know what? I don't think it's a bad idea at all. I would love to know, as a percentage of a whole ticket price, what it would be. The way that we, as my family, which is my wife and I and 2 kids, we try and do it so we're not all sitting in a row, because my kids will just piss each other off. So it's usually me and one of my sons and my wife and the other son, and we sit either, stacked, so we're not all in one row.
Yeah.
And when we flew over, I booked our flights ages ago and picked our seats ages ago, and I did me on the window and my son on the aisle and left the seat in the middle, hoping that no one would be stupid enough to pick that seat. But if I could pay, a little bit of money to make sure I didn't have anybody in there, I would be able to relax a little bit more. But there's an interesting twist to that tale and I'll tell you that when I tell you about my travels later. But yes, I think I would definitely be the target demographic for this product.
That's also my idea. The first idea came into mind. I was thinking it's a win-win because it's a win for the passenger, for you in that case, and it's a win for the airline because instead of having a seat that nobody has paid for, you actually have paid something for that free seat.
Yeah.
Now the question is, imagine the same scenario. You enter into the flight. You've paid, I don't know, because it's an experiment. It hasn't launched yet, so I don't know what the price would be. But let's say you've paid $200 to ensure that the seat next to you on a row of 3, because you're already 2, is not taken. You board the plane, and then half of the plane is empty, meaning that you would have gotten it anyway.
Yeah.
How would you feel about that?
Yeah, I would imagine there's some pretty intense revenue management number crunching going on here that
clearly,
finds the sweet spot for, the flight being busy enough where there's the real threat that somebody will come and sit in that seat versus the scenario that you just described. So, to answer your question, yes, I would feel pretty upset, but one would hope that they would give passengers enough information to make an informed decision. By you can't always tell by looking at the seat map prior to 24 hours. I always go in Expert Flyer and look at the actual loads. So I was pretty confident that we would be okay when I looked at the loads for the flight coming over. But the amount of times,
but we are outliers. Not a lot of people will check Expert
exactly.
Flyer.
Well, not a lot of people do. And then when within 24 hours and you're auto allocated a seat, then the whole thing gets turned on its head.
Yeah. You know what? I think they're right to do it. It would be nice to see if the experiment works because I'm sure that other airlines, although some load factors, even if you're 80%, it would be nice to have that option, and it would be nice for even someone tall like me if I could pay just a slightly more.
It really
to
does
ensure
make a
that
difference.
I would actually pay for that. I'd rather pay for that instead of paying $600 or whatever to be upgraded.
Well, that's another thing. That's another thing. I think, again, that comes down to being able to provide the customer with enough information. Like if you're going to pay $300 to keep that seat open, but then they offer an airport upgrade for $150, again, I would be pissed.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go back to Europe. Forgot to mention last episode, it's just a tidbit. I went to see Guns N' Roses at the Olympic Stadium. Yeah, that was really amazing. At the Olympic Stadium in London. And there's one thing I wanted to say. I'm not going to do a review of the show. It was amazing. 5 stars out of 5, like our show. But the one thing that was really cool was the fact that you would see all the planes in final and all the planes departing from Leahy. You see them so close to you. So you have a concert and you have these. I mean, I'm probably the only geek out of 80,000 people looking at this when I was listening to Guns N' Roses, but still, that is so cool. So if you ever have a concert later at the Olympic Stadium, in London, guys, just put your eyes up. You might see really cool birds over there. This is really, really fantastic. You used the BA to go to California?
I did indeed, yep. 787-9.
So you were not in the strikes. You actually skipped that, right?
We could well have
Go
been.
ahead.
We could well have been. Our flight was mixed fleet crew, who are the ones that are striking, and it's a very, very long strike. It's 16 days, but there was no issue. Oh, you know what? I'm lying. There actually was a pretty significant issue, and I will give BA massive props for the way that they dealt with it. When we got on board, it was clear that it wasn't a normal situation vis-a-vis cabin crew. They all looked incredibly young. First of all.
Oh.
Very, very, very young. Even the people in the premium cabin and the cabin service manager, they all looked very, very young. That just may have been a coincidence, but I have a feeling that there were lower on the roster people. But the cabin service manager came on and said, we are working with a severely reduced number of cabin crew on this flight. There was only 8 flight attendants for the entire plane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's a big 787-9. So that's the bigger of the two available models. And they were hustling. They said, look, we really appreciate your patience. It's because of the industrial action. They kept apologizing. They warned us before we even pushed back that the service was going to take a little bit longer. And, they would. But I have to say, they were fantastic. My son was really unwell on the flight. I mean, nothing serious, just he does this. And he destroyed 2 seats. So if you were flying from San Jose to London on Thursday and there was a couple of seats blocked in economy, that was my son. But they were great. Nothing was too much trouble for them. I think they felt like they were on the back foot. It could have gone either way, and they handled it with dignity and grace. I bash BA a lot. They did a great job.
Oh, wow. That's actually very nice to hear. That's really nice to hear. I'm just going to, since you're talking about something very positive about BA, because we've been not bashing, but we've been, of course, criticizing BA in the past few episodes for a lot of things they mishandled. But there's been this story about this 4-year-old girl who loves planes and actually goes to airports to see them, but she had never flown before, and BA found out that she had never flown before and made everything possible for her to actually fly. They gave her a VIP flight. It was a domestic flight in the UK. I don't remember which. I think it was Leeds to London or something and back. But I mean, what a surprise. And this is like kind of, I know it's maybe silly and small, but having an airline that cares, that says, oh, we know that you love airplanes, you've never been in one, you've never flown, here you go, this is a VIP treatment for you, we're going to fly you for free back and forth so you can enjoy that. At 4 years, I found the story fantastic.
Yeah, no, I did too. And
I
think it's a lovely reflection, I think, of a deeper kind of ethos in BA that's been a little bit suppressed in the last few years, but it's lovely to see it peeking out from time to time. And again, like I said, you really saw the strength of that culture on this flight over. They had their backs against the wall, and they never lost sight of what was important, which was the customer experience. And I have to raise my hat to them on that.
So you said, you hinted at that earlier in the show, that we know that BA actually applied to use Qatar Airways aircraft to basically, so they wet lease. So by wet lease we mean they not only got the aircraft, but they also got the crew. So there was a chance, if you were flying short haul, especially maybe medium haul in Europe, that even if you bought BA, you would end up in a Qatar Airways flight. And again, I think there's 2 reasons. One of the reasons, of course, is BA needed capacity, and that's what we'll discuss about. But the other thing, obviously, is that Qatar Airways, because of the situation, we also hinted at the fact that they have to reduce their operations because of the ban they're experiencing now around them in Qatar, actually had those aircrafts available. So you saw them. You actually saw those.
Oh, yeah, they
right?
were everywhere. They were everywhere, all over T5. And I read a trip report on airliners, and they, this person couldn't believe their luck when I think they were doing a flight to somewhere, Aberdeen or Dublin or somewhere very short haul, and they were in Club Europe, the business class, and said, boy, I could not have been any luckier. The seat was phenomenal. The food was the standard Club Europe catering, and that was fine. The service was amazing. They just said, compared to the kind of clapped out Club Europe experience that you can occasionally get, that it was top drawer. So, if you're flying, as Paul said, short haul or medium haul on BA, do whatever you need to do to get some good luck going in your life, because this sounds like a fun opportunity.
Yeah. I think it's A320s, A321s. I'm not sure if they extended that to other aircraft, but still, I mean, the seats. And maybe it's a wake-up call to some of the guys who actually only fly in Europe, because they're like, these exist in short haul.
Yeah,
can
exactly.
Get that.
It was good. I read the trip report with a great deal of interest because I was wondering if we would see one. But yeah, there was maybe 8 or 9 on the ground, or at least moving around the airport when we were there. Yeah, and we left on a Thursday, and T5 was busy, really busy.
By the way, any other things you have to mention about your flight? Because you just mentioned about your son, you mentioned about the fact that you had a reduced crew. Yeah. Any other happening in the flight?
Again, positive on BA. So we used the first wing to check in, but there was 4 of us, and they're like, nice. I'm really sorry, we can't put you through the security because it goes straight into the lounge and you can only bring in 1 guest. And I'm like, no, are you kidding? It's fine.
Oh, okay.
It's fine. They're like, but use the fast track security, please, no problem at all. And what's interesting, I mentioned earlier that I'd picked a window and an aisle ×2 for my family. And I looked on the seat map on Expert Flyer maybe 10 days before the flight, and BA had blocked the middle seats for us.
Oh, okay, wow.
I had not requested that or anything, but they had automatically blocked them. And I would love to know if it's because they knew that there was a family there, or if it's because I'm a gold card holder, or what triggered that to be done. I asked when I checked in, and they said they didn't know. But here's what's interesting, I think, as well, is I went to the galleries South Lounge, which is the bigger of the 2 business class lounges, and I went up to the lady at one of the desks and said, is there any chance I could smuggle in my incredibly well-behaved, that was the lie, children into the lounge? And she looked at me, she's like, you're a gold card holder, right? I said, yeah. She said, you're only really allowed to have 1 person, 1 guest in. Is your wife, does she have status or anything? And I said, actually, my son is 6, he's bronze. And she's like, oh, wow. And she said, no, but you're only allowed to have 1 guest. I'm really sorry. It's pretty busy in there, but enjoy. And just ushers us in. And that's the second time in a row that's happened. I don't, and it's the second time in a row where they've had to go through the spiel of, you only have 1 guest. It's really busy, but go ahead. But I love it. I think it's so nice that it's even the perception of breaking or bending the rules was really, really nice.
Absolutely.
So my kids, there's a kind of cordoned off games room area. The kids are quiet, but it was a nice gesture and really, really appreciated.
These are the little things again, right? We say, I mean, of course, it's sometimes a lottery. You might not get that for maybe another person. Maybe that day is super, very busy. But these little things when, these frontline people have some ownership and can make these decisions, make the whole difference about the passenger experience. You're not in front of a robot, you're in front of a human being that's going to either tell you no, but in a very polite way, or either tell you no and still let you in, like with a wink and a smile. I mean, come on, this is what makes an airline great.
It was so great, and I really, really appreciated it, and I let her know that. And and again, as I mentioned, the crew on the flight were excellent. We had a bit of a departure delay because a passenger was denied entry to the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Post check-in. So something happened right there. And of course, their bag was like in the first container that was loaded onto the airplane. So that took a little bit of time. But it was a glorious flight on a beautiful, very new Dreamliner, which is just such a joyous plane. I tried to explain to I kept turning around to my wife going, isn't this amazing? It's like you feel better. And she's like, and she spent most of her career in aviation as well. She's like, I'm watching a movie, go away. But my kids like playing, they liked the windows and flying into San Jose. Actually, another credit to BA, I took I'm doing this 90-mile charity bike ride in Boston in a few weeks, and I brought my road bike with me, and it arrived with not a scratch on it. Perfectly handled. So again, really great job, BA. Shout out to you guys for just a wonderful experience.
Well, good. And I don't know how to get to the next item of news because we were both a bit ironical about that one, that there's a new director of brand of customer experience at British Airways. The guy who was there quit pretty abruptly. I don't know if he was fired or he quit. And suddenly this person who comes from Telefonica, I think, was hired. I don't have the name in front of me. Carolina?
Yeah, Carolina Martinoli.
What do you think?
Well, there's two things here. I think Troy Warfield, who was previously in this role, I think perhaps might have been the fall guy for the outage. which is a shame if that's the case. He was senior, but not nearly senior enough to take the fall for this. This lady, I don't know anything about her on a personal level. I'm sure she's lovely. She was with Alex Cruz at Iberia for a while, which immediately made me suspicious. But then, yes, as you say, Telefonica, ICI, and Yell. She was the marketing director at Iberia before. If you want to bring revolution, you need to bring someone from outside. But I think you need to bring someone from outside of the industry, or from somebody who has worked for an airline where that level of pedigree is so high. Like, not necessarily in Emirates, because we know and appreciate their physical product, but I'm thinking someone like a Cathay or Singapore Airlines, or maybe even a Virgin Atlantic that could bring that experience in. So who knows? We'll have to see.
Yeah, I agree. They're bringing someone from in-house of sorts, and you want, in such a situation with BAs being beaten down in all the press, etc., you might want some fresh blood.
Yeah.
We said the same thing about Cathay and having everybody from Swire, and having somebody from the outside would be a good idea. That's a similar idea here. I think I said in the episode before that about the fact that what I'm hearing inside of IAG is not that pretty. It seems to be a lot of inertia, and because people have been working there for a long time, which is good. Loyalty, we value loyalty, but maybe it's time for one or two key roles to have someone with fresh ideas, fresh ways of thinking, and maybe fresh ways of processing all these ideas within a company to come on board.
I agree.
But
I agree.
Good luck to Carolina still. Which news should I go? Yeah, well, there's just a fun one here. We always say that low-cost travel is a disruption. And there's this story, fantastic, on the Independent, Indy 100 actually, which is the fast-paced news outlet for the Independent in the UK, about this guy who was trying to go from Newcastle to London. So these are two cities in the UK. And he looked at the pricing, and the price with the train was 78.50 quid. And then he said, well, actually, if I were to use low costs, I would get a better deal. There's no direct low cost. He did Newcastle to Menorca in Spain for 16 quid, then stayed a few hours there, had a drink, and then found a Menorca to London, so the flight back, for £11. So basically, the entire flight got him, I think, 40 quid less than the train would have taken, and he had like some cocktail on the beach. So, I mean, just to say that the state of travel, when people complain, I mean, you can get a Menorca to London for £11. That's nothing.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. Of course, it's not about, oh, well, if you'd taken the train, it would have been faster. How much is your time worth? Blah, blah, blah. It was to show that there's no cost-based analysis to justify how much train travel costs in the UK. I think is the point he was trying to make, and he made it in spectacular fashion.
We had a message from one of our listeners, Steve Pride, that's his name on Twitter, at Steve285, and he was telling us that Norwegian, since we're talking low cost, Norwegian has canceled a lot of flights for the second summer in a row, apparently due to cruise shortages. And there's apparently a lot of uproar in the Norwegian press. Of course, we don't read that as much, because although Norwegian is now global low cost, it still has its roots there. So, of course, I guess people living there have a closer relationship and feel like people here in the UK with BA, right? And there's been a lot of uproar, to the point that some people were starting to say that maybe the employees of Norwegian were, I'm not going to use the term mistreated, but the fact that they were really paid not enough, that their vacations had to be cancelled, they were flying way too much. Steve said that if you compare that to the number of hours flown by some of the crew in regional flights in the US, it's compared. So we're not talking about slaves for Norwegian, right. But he was asking us basically what we thought. Do we think safe, knowing that some of these airlines are using their crew to the limit? I mean, of course, there are safety limits, but how do we feel about it?
It's a difficult situation. I mean, one of the most interesting exposés I read on this, not even exposé is not the right word, but I read Cockpit Confidential a few years ago, which is a fantastic book if you ever get an opportunity to read it. And it's written by I think he's Delta mainline pilot. And it's basically everything you've always wanted to ask about every component of air travel from the perspective of a pilot. And this is one thing that he has highlighted, and we've discussed many, many times on this show, about when you are in the right seat, very young pilot on a regional airline in the US, you get paid peanuts and you work like a dog. And I think that that Norwegian is experiencing such rapid growth, and the worldwide pilot shortage that every airline in every country is experiencing has caught them short a little bit. Do I feel less safe? No, especially not in Europe, because we have such stringent regulations on crew rest time and all of that no, I don't feel unsafe, but it's still a problem that is going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. By the way, guys, if you're hearing sometimes background music on my end of the recording, is because some of the tabs we have open for the show suddenly get active, and I got these freaking videos
I know, that
coming
should
up
be
online.
Punished by jail time.
I'm so sorry for that, guys. I'm trying to control that.
If you run a website that has auto-playing videos, shame.
Mike. Steve, to just continue that, just to say one more thing, Steve also says, and that's interesting, that the press has accused the CEO of Norwegian to say that since the price is so low, people will tend to forget about the bad experiences they might experience in Norwegian and just keep buying again. So do you think that plays a role? I mean, I still believe that price is the most important thing. Ryanair has been beaten up for years and people will still flying in hordes with them. So do you think people actually do forget a bad experience? Or they just like gut it up and say, oh, you know what, I know I'm going to have a bad experience. And I'm not saying that Norwegian is a bad experience because I have the good ones, but
I think a lot of people kind of forget and just say have that opinion with Ryanair. I think their expectations are so low that when everything goes smoothly, they're pleasantly surprised. But I think that Southwest have proven that you can scale to extraordinary levels and maintain a very high level of customer satisfaction as well. I don't think that those are mutually exclusive. So again, I think this is growing pains for Norwegian. I'm a big fan of what they do and what they're trying to do. So I wish them luck, and I hope that they can solve this problem sooner rather than later.
Moving on to some updates about the news we had in the last episode. It was the Paris Air Show. I promised you that I would give you the tally of how many aircraft were sold by the two big ones. Boeing 571, Airbus 346. Bear in mind, though, that you know how it goes. You know, these are promises, and some of these people then cancel or, you know. But Boeing, as we had into that, seemed to have won that war, if there's such a war. And also the other news linked to that is that Leahy, who was heading Airbus customer relations for, I think, more than 20 years, actually. He's retiring. And you might not know that guy, but he's responsible himself for more than $1 trillion worth of aircrafts being sold by Airbus. So we want just to give him a hats off here, because these people are the cornerstone of our industry. And when they move on, well, we had to find the next one.
Yeah, it's a staggering statistic. And he's really been the voice of Airbus for years and years and years. And whenever you have these sort of exchanges between Boeing corporate and Airbus corporate, it's him. And he's very, very good. He's an incredible salesman, obviously, with 1 trillion orders on his own book. But it's an end of an era for Airbus, really.
Talking about that, there's some shakeups happening. So I don't know. It's probably not related directly to the sales in Paris, but you know, Airbus is this weird company compared to Boeing because they had to take care of all the sensibilities of many countries. You know, it's a consortium. There's the hands of a lot of European countries in it, and it seems that they're regrouping everything now, and it's and basically it's going to be more like a normal company with one single head and one single person responsible for aircraft, and not this kind of more networked and diverse and sometimes awkward ways of setting up a company. It seems really there's some hard shakes within the company. I think if you're right at Airbus right now, you're either on the good side or on the bad side.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more going on behind the surface of this restructuring than meets the eye. And there was some interesting comments on airliners or one of the other sites about this, that there's a little bit of a power struggle going on with that vacuum that Leahy left. So it'll be interesting to see how this plans out. But you're right, it is an extraordinary, it's almost like one of the big Japanese conglomerates, the way it's structured. And it's very, then you sprinkle in however many companies Etihad represents, or countries Etihad represents, that just, I think perhaps maybe they're just trying to simplify things, as you say.
Still in the Paris show, we mentioned the 797, so that future aircraft that Boeing is promising and hinting at. So there's no aircraft yet, but as soon as the news was out, Norwegian said, we want it.
Yeah.
So they are forward thinking.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think that I think a lot of airlines have been waiting for this to arrive. And I think it's also why you've seen the extension of life for so many 767s and 757s, is so many airlines have been waiting for something like this to come along, and Norwegian just jumped on it, which is great. I'm excited to learn more about this particular plane project. I think it's going to be a while before we get anything concrete, and it could be 10 or 15 years before we see it in the air, but it's still exciting. It's very rare that a new plane is born.
One plane that you can already experience, of course, the CS100. I've flown them. You haven't flown it yet. The CS300, which is the big brother or sister, depending on which gender you want to give to the bird. So Swiss had switched some of the orders of CS100 to have the CS300. It was delivered. So I think only Air Baltic had it up to now. So you can now fly the CS300. I haven't yet with Swiss. They've come up with a special livery for it. It's a very strange livery. Many people have actually asked me what do I think about it, because it's a livery that was created in Western Switzerland. So basically the French part of Switzerland, where I come from. I was born and raised in Geneva. I don't find it ugly, but I find it a bit of a big question mark. I don't know what it actually means. I need to see it live to actually make a judgment. So guys, to all of those who have asked me what do I think about this livery, I will reserve judgment until I am able to board it. It flies in routes over Europe, so I hope to be able to fly it. The interesting bit for you, Alex, because that's a chance for you to fly maybe the CS100, is that BA is considering the CS100 for Lucy to New York.
Are they really? I've heard mentions of this, but I haven't heard anything official. Have they actually come out and said that they're going to do this? This is very cool.
No, it's indirect rumors, indirect information. But the noise has been growing. There might be something into it, because that would be, first of all, the CS100 is a very appropriate plane for Lucy. He can actually, land at shortened runways, etc. So it's actually perfect. Having been inside, it also looks like it could be a very nice business jet, even like a full business class jet. Yeah. So it could make sense.
And of course, that's Bombardier's bread and butter, is the regional, but also the business aircraft as well. So that's a natural extension. Embraer have done it with pretty much every airframe they've ever created. They've made a business version, so it makes sense. But I would love for BA to do this, because they've killed that service almost completely. The Lucy New York flight, which I've done, but I would love to see them pump a little bit more effort into that one.
And I haven't flown from Lucy for a long time, actually. So I've only seen the flights from my Guns N' Roses concert, but I need to go back there. I've flown Lufthansa recently, and one thing that Qatar already does, and I think you've seen that in other airlines as well, Lufthansa is deploying now iPad minis to all their staff, so they'll have, the seat map, all the information about you. This is something we see more and more, and I think it's pretty cool, because it allows, I know that you, Alex, said in one episode that it's so cool when, especially I think it was BA, they remember your name by heart, and they come to you and they talk to you as if they don't have any information from them. But between that and not being able to manage my last name, having an iPad is not a bad idea, I think.
Yeah, I think if you can give the frontline staff the information they need to kind of unlock those moments of delight, it's very helpful for them to be able to have it. So as long as they can do it in a genuine and human to human way, right, then I think actually, it's very powerful. Very good use of technology.
Did you ask for a picture during your flight at BA, because you have this app that you can go to the flight deck?
To do that. I will do that on the way home.
Yeah, especially if you have kids, I think that's an easy way in. I mean, I'm not sure you can do it in the air. You have to do it before or after when you're still on the ground. But you should try. I mean, with your kids, it will be a fantastic memory. Plus, it's a 787-9 cockpit. It's not something we see every day yet, so you should absolutely do it. Just make me jealous, Alex. Southwest has received its 737th 37. I had an issue to say that, actually. Guys, by the way, I wanted to say something, because you might have heard it. I didn't actually acknowledge it for the past, at least 10 episodes. I had braces on, and clearly some of the words that we're saying were not super clear. I removed the braces yesterday, and now my mouth is adapting back to having a normal way of saying words. So please accept my apologies if some of the words I screw them up when I try to say them. So 737th. Oh my God. So, are you not flying Southwest?
I am next week.
Oh, there you go. Maybe you're gonna have this flight. There's a plaque when you enter the front door, so you might actually.
I'm looking forward to it. I always love flying Southwest. Southwest, so I will. I'll keep an eye out. It's extraordinary the amount of airplanes that company has. So I'll have a quick peek and see if I'm lucky enough to get that special airplane.
Did you not go? I saw you posted something on Instagram. Did you go to some air show yesterday?
No, that's just the airport near my 2 or 3 minutes away from where my in-laws live. That's where I learned how to fly myself, and they have a lot of old warbirds, a lot of acrobatic planes, and this was just a regular Sunday morning. There was a T6 doing low passes and touch and goes all morning. And then an Osprey, one of the big transitional wing military transports, which is part helicopter, part airplane, was flying over as well. I think I've only ever seen one of those flying once or twice before, so that was pretty cool to see. But yeah, that's a fun place to hang out on a Sunday afternoon if you're a nerd like I am.
Yeah. I'm so very jealous. Were you not the one that sent me this trip report of 1985 in the UK?
Actually, if you're in the UK, if any of you are in the UK and you are anywhere near London, about a 45 minutes drive north is Duxford, and they've got all of these beautiful British airliners that you can go and crawl around. It's a fantastic museum. But yeah, this chap wrote this trip report recently, 2 weeks ago for us, but it was, as Paul said, in 1985, and I believe he was a American serviceman stationed at one of the RAF bases in the UK, who also happened to be a total AV geek. And so he wanted to go and try all these airliners. And so he went on a British Midland Vickers Viscount, and he's posted all of this wonderful, these, not just the photos, but he scanned his boarding pass and his ticket, all this sort of wonderful paraphernalia from 1985. And these are, even in 1985, these were old airplanes. And he was up on the flight deck for some of them. And then he did, I think, a British Caledonian, of course. So these are all now long defunct airlines. On that was also a Viscount, but there's just, the pictures are just wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
And I love how he writes that as if it's one of the trip reports we make today. So it's exactly the same layout with the pictures of the boarding passes, and it's totally different era. I mean, I've yet to do an actual trip report. I never find the time to do one, and I probably don't take enough pictures. But some of those guys, thank you guys for existing, because we can live vicariously through these pictures, and especially those, because I was 10 years old when this chap took that flight, so I would not have been able to remember that vividly.
They're so great. Yeah, there's a BAC 111 in there as well, and a Virgin Atlantic Viscount, which I didn't even know was a thing, and he went to Maastricht on this. It's the most weird thing, and go take a look. It's like going back in time.
The one guy who probably got back in time very quickly in his head, because he might have thought he was dying, was this guy who crushed a bus in the 737 by Tar Asia, I think it was. The pictures are staggering. The guy, one of these buses you guys would take on to be shuttled in through the airport, through terminals, basically got into an aircraft. I mean, how does that happen? I don't know. Somebody clearly didn't pay attention, but I clearly hope that these guys had insurance, because, oh my God.
Yeah, the pictures are devastating. I think everybody was okay, but yeah, just awful. I mean, I think the plane might be a write-off. The bus certainly is.
Moving on closely to my trip, my trips, I've taken quite a few.
Yeah, you've been all over the place.
I actually don't exactly remember when I left off, but let's say, so I was going to Italy for a little R&R in the middle of Italy. I flew to Pisa with BA, with a 321, and I made one of these stupid mistakes that we think we're so clever, but we still do. I think I told during the last episode, yay, I get an emergency exit. Only that 321s from BA have, so there's two sets of emergency exits, two emergency exits in the middle. Each has 2 rows of seats. Never take the one in front, which is the one I took, because it has actually less legroom than all the other rows. And at the same time, doesn't recline. So I had actually the worst seats possible in the flight. It was okay, honestly, for a 2 hours flight. But I mean, still, I was like, what did I think about not thinking about this through? It was probably, because on the BA's website or app, when you select the seat, and I was able to select it before checking, because obviously it was gold, they highlight those in green. So you're like, I'm safe. This is better seat, I'm going to press this one. And obviously it was the worst seat ever. So do not take the row in front of the emergency exit. Take the one that is slightly behind, because this one clearly has a lot of leg room, not mine. The bonus was that I was seated right next to the flight attendant, who was actually seated in a reverse position.
Okay.
So it's really cool because while you're taking off or landing, I was chatting with her. That was pretty cool. So then I had to interrupt my INR to go to Paris for a client that actually does duty-free shops all around the world. It's called Lagardère Travel Retail. It's one of the 4 big groups that does all these duty-free shops you see around in the world. They do probably, I think, like 40 airports. So you might have, all you guys have seen one of those recently. They own the one, of course, because they're French. Pretty much everything that has to do with French luxury is with them. So that was a very cool client to work with. But the flight, so I had to take a cab for 2 hours to get to Rome FCO airport. And I had this memory of Rome, and we talked about it last year, a year and a half. You remember there was this big fire in Rome airport, and I was like, my God, what would be the situation? I remember like a dire situation, not only because of the fire, but probably the fire had created a very bad layout. Everything was temporary. So I was like, my God, I'm going to have a nightmare. Well, I arrived Terminal 1. Terminal 1 is the Alitalia terminal. And my God, I was surprised. And I'm sorry because I say that as if I was expecting something really bad. But the Terminal 1 is spotless clean. Like, I rarely seen a terminal so clean than that. It's super efficient. I had actually a lot of time in front of me. My flight was supposed to leave at 8:30. And I look online and I see there's the 6:30 flight. And it's like, it's 5. And I go and I say, may I be on the 6:30 flight? And she looks at her computer, like in 2 seconds, tells me, oh, you can even be at this 5:30 flight. I look at her, come on, 5:30 is like in 30 minutes. I've not checked in. I've not gone through security. She's like, no, you'll be fine. I look at her and say, okay, challenge accepted. You know what? Okay, I had fast track security, and it was the middle of the day. So there's not a lot of people. Even if I had to take the normal security, it took me literally 3 minutes to do the whole thing. And I was in front of the gate. So super efficient. I was really super surprised by this terminal. I flew Air France, very nice. So I was a 320. I always enjoy Air France, to be honest. Maybe because I speak French, but there's always something good about it, cool about it. The way back, I was in an aircraft that I'm not sure I had ever taken. If I did, it had been a long time. It was the A318, which is a tiny 320.
Yeah,
That's a very cute aircraft, actually.
It is cute. Cute is the perfect word.
Super experience. I mean, I was afraid of this time of Charles de Gaulle, because people know how we both love Charles de Gaulle. Well, David Bizer was a friend of ours who lives in Paris and works as a recruiter there for startups. Always kind of challenged us on the position, saying, like, if you live in Paris, Charles de Gaulle is not so bad, besides going there because it's not actually fast train or whatever. Well, actually, it's true, because it was okay, actually. I cleared everything, not 3 minutes like the Terminal 1 Alitalia, but Terminal 2F, I think I was, which is the Air France, the big fat Air France terminal. It was actually pretty fast. He also brought up memories for me, because that's the terminal I was commuting at when I was living in Japan to go back to Switzerland. I was in the exact same lounge I used to be, so that was pretty cool too. And they have this lounge that is, you see only aircrafts everywhere you are, so it's really nice. You see all the jet bridges and all the aircrafts going and coming, so that's actually pretty cool. So yeah, I will give that to Charles de Gaulle. I will mention quick news here that Charles de Gaulle will have its own TGV, so the high-speed train, built within the next 5 years, apparently. So that one remark I just said about being hard to get might be obsolete in a few years, because they will have a super fast train to go into the city that will change the game for Charles de Gaulle, because it's truly a nightmare to get there. The experience of the 318 was fantastic. I was in the front row. It was honestly super cool. And again, Rome FCO, I land there and I cleared everything. I didn't have, obviously, any checked-in luggage. I cleared everything in 3 minutes as well. Of course, we are in Schengen, so there's no immigration, but that was super fast. So I can only say that I was happy. A few days later, I was flying to Seoul, the airport of today. So I was again flying out of FCO, this time Terminal 3, which is basically all the other airlines. Terminal 2 is the low cost, if you want, and Terminal 3 is the one that burned down. So that was the dire experience I remember, and it's pretty impressive what they've done. They've actually, because they had no choice but to rebuild it or refurbish it because it had burned down, they made something quite cool. So the The check-in is still okay-ish. I think it's too cramped. It was Saturday. A lot of tourists were going on vacation, so that was a bit cramped, I'll admit. The one thing I noticed, and I told you, and I think it's something that we'll see more and more in airports around the world, is that the part where American Airlines, not the airline, but U.S. airlines, were being checked in was a separate area with a pane of glass. So you had to go through a different part of the check-in. It's all about this extra security, whatever. So it's a bit like, of course, we mentioned that earlier on the show, flying to Israel, right? It's not as stringent probably as Israel, but they have already their own part in the check-in, in the departure hall, only for U.S. airlines.
I think we're going to, as you say, we're going to see more and more of that. Yeah. It's just the way it's going.
Yeah. So checking with Korean Air, that was, these, I'm not going to bash them, but sometimes it's super quickly. You go online on the app, you can check in, which I do. And at the end, instead of getting a boarding pass, I get a confirmation which tells me, you are confirmed, you are check-in, but this is not a boarding pass. So I still need to go to the check-in counter, which weird. I found completely...
What's the point?
Exactly. I go to the check-in, which was a bit of a disaster in terms of the layout, because everybody was in a wrong queue and people, a bit... I will say, like in a most gentle way, what you expect sometimes in Italy, But everything was more, positive. People were happy, so it was okay. And then I discovered what happened for Terminal 3. And I know it's not the airport of today, but they've really redone it completely. It's in a strange position because you can still see parts of the old terminal, and the all refurbished or new part of the Terminal 3 are amazing. Are truly amazing. They're beautiful. They're super big. By the way, the duty-free shop was done by the French guys that was working, so I was texting them, hey guys, I'm in your duty-free shop here. It's super airy, very large passages, you never feel cramped. Honestly, it's a success. Hats off to Rome FCO for having done that, because it's really impressive, honestly. You will end up going there, Alex, and you will be impressed. It's one of the best laid out airports I've seen in Europe, to be honest. It's up to what we see in Asia, man.
That's really impressive.
What is not impressive is that, again, a few gates, not mine, a few of the lounges are still in the old part. And these lounges are the worst I've ever seen. I mean, not the worst I've ever seen, because I said that was Pisa, which I couldn't test this time. I stayed literally for 2 minutes, and then I said, you know what, I'm out of here. Yeah. But you know what? When I came back, I said, I have my priority pass, and I'm going to check another lounge. This is at the time I discovered that new part I just was talking about, and then I decided just to walk around it and to discover it, and it's worth it. So, bravo to Rome FCO and Flying Korean, the 747-8i. Man, I've done it. Nick Donnelly was actually, playing with me on Twitter, saying, "Oh, you, if you like that kind of airplane, you were born 20 years too late." Yeah, probably, because of course we are lovers of the 747. It's very similar than the 747-400. Two things that actually set them apart that you can feel and one you can visibly see. The upper part is longer.
Yes.
And the other thing, it is actually quieter. It's not quiet to 350 levels, but it's clearly, I think Boeing says, 20% quieter. You can actually feel that. It is 20% quieter. I was on the upper deck. I had read by Ben Schlapping on his 1 Mile at a Time website that he considers that business seat, to be the best ever business seat.
That's a heck of a statement.
Honestly.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I will still say I am an outlier, because people knows, if you've been listening to that show, that I am 196 centimeters, so 6'4", a little bit more than 6'4" in feet. For lying flat, I'm slightly too tall, which is why I would have a preference probably for Cathay Pacific, which I had the best night ever in Cathay Pacific business class when we talked about it a few episodes ago. But there's one thing that is really great, is that you feel completely secluded. Every seat, even though you're on the window, I had 5 windows for me. It looks like almost like first class. I had 5 windows, fully lie flat, big screen, and I had my own access to the aisle. And it's super well done as well, because there's a little table. It's a little protuberance at the end of the seat of my fellow passenger. They're not exactly level I'm slightly ahead of him or her, if you want, or the other seat, which allows that little space, but which also allows the flight attendant to come give you food or talk to you without disturbing the other passenger. So it's really, really well thought out. So I was super lucky. I'm super happy to have done it. I had a great flight. I slept like a baby. You have to try that.
I can't wait.
In terms of the soft product, I will say that Korean Air is very good, but it's not Singapore, it's not Cathay, it's not Emirates. The quality of the food was, I took all the Asian options, the Korean options, sorry. It was honestly fantastic. It is slightly robotic, and also you can clearly feel that most of the flight, the upper deck was Koreans, and I was a foreigner, and maybe they weren't sure how to handle me a bit. Maybe it was just that day, it was just an observation, but it was very, very good. I really did appreciate it. Very good IFE, so it is a fantastic flight to Seoul. On the way back, similar, I had also the 747-8i, so I flew twice back to London. The one thing that was super cool is that when you are in Xi'an, they are at, I don't know, it seemed to me that there were at least 10 of those 8Is all around us.
Really?
They have, I don't know, they rely on those for a lot of flights. It was really fantastic. Honestly, just to see them was really fantastic. In the flight, again on the upper deck, I had, on the way in, I had 18A, which is supposedly an emergency exit. I say supposedly because when you have a lie flat seats, emergency exit doesn't mean a lot of things. Yeah, exactly, right? The only difference is that, of course, I had a big fat area that was free in front of me. I had 19A, so the seat just right behind on the way back because 18A wasn't available. The one difference, not a big one, but it's really cool that you have, like on the 380 on the upper deck, you have these side storages. The side storage on 18A, I could have put like 3 carry-ons. It was huge.
Wow.
I could use so much space. Whilst on
that.
19A, it was smaller, but still, I mean, honestly, kudos to Korean Air. If only that they bought these aircrafts. They're fantastic aircraft. The one thing I will finish by that is that maybe because I'm getting older, but it looked like all the crew was younger than me, including the pilots.
Oh, wow.
I met him twice, was going to the bathroom. You go because the bathroom is just in front of the door, access to the flight deck. And twice I saw the captain. By the way, didn't seem they were not overly concerned about having the door being opened whilst we were there.
Oh, that's interesting.
But that's good. Yeah. But the guy I was like, this guy must be 25 or something. Probably not, by the way. But I'm getting older. I'm like, oh, wow.
Exactly.
He's getting older.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
One more piece of news about Korean since I'm on it. Delta and the Korean, they are already both part of SkyTeam. They are now going closer. They're doing interlining agreements. So you'll have, if you fly Delta or if you fly a Korean from and to the US and obviously Korea, but also a few of the other places in Asia, you'll have a much better integration. This is probably good news if you fly over the Pacific. So Alex, if you want to go to Korea from where you are, just book on Delta and you'll probably be on a 747-8i by Korean Air.
That's good to know. That's great to know.
Okay, that's because we have talked a lot and we have still an airport to do. So let's go just for 2 news. One, since we're in Asia. That woman who threw coins into the engine of a 320 because she wanted to, I guess, wish good luck.
Yeah, this is adorable / terrifying. Like she was a very elderly lady, and she did what I guess is a common practice of throwing these coins into. Well, she threw them into the engine as she was walking to the airplane, and of course,
yeah, that's the thing.
I think she threw 9 coins, and I think maybe only 1 or 2 actually went into the engine. But they had to go and do a full borescope, take the engine apart, and it took, I think they were delayed 5 hours. They didn't press any charges because she didn't, this wasn't a deliberate act of sabotage. She just thought she was doing something, the right thing. I don't know if she'd ever been on an airplane before. So it's hard not to smile at the story, but I'm glad that somebody saw. Otherwise, it really could have been disastrous. It could have been entirely innocuous, but it could have been disastrous.
I mean, it's cute. I mean, honestly, it's hard to fault her because she probably did that again, really for peace and safety of the flight. There was no ill intent in that whatsoever. But
No.
talking about the ill intent, that piece of crazy news. I don't know what the guy was on. This story, I think I don't remember which flight it was in the US. So that guy goes to the bathroom. He's in business, what they call first in the US. He goes to the bathroom, goes out, says something to a flight attendant, goes back into the bathroom for a minute, goes out, and then simply attempts to basically open the door mid-flight. And had to be subdued by extraordinary means. It's crazy.
It is crazy. I think they were doing, it was Seattle to Beijing
correct, absolutely,
on a 767, and this guy was on a buddy pass as well, which means that he wasn't an employee of the airline, but he had a friend or relation who gave him a pass to fly, basically as a non-revenue passenger on this flight, and he clearly went nuts and tried to open the door and basically got his ass kicked. There was this huge brawl, and they cracked him over the head with a wine bottle to try and... I mean, it was basically anything they could to get this guy to chill out. And they zip-tied him to finally subdue him. But, he was charged with interfering with a flight crew member, which is a federal offense in the U.S., as it bloody well should be, and assaulting, these two flight attendants, and is, I think, due to go to a hearing. I think either just happened or is going to happen on Thursday. But he unbelievable. And there was pictures on Twitter that I think came from the Seattle Times.
Oh my God!
Of the galley, which is where the door was, thrashed. Absolutely thrashed. It looks like those pictures you see after turbulence, There's wine stains on the flipping ceiling.
But I think that you mentioned the wine bottle. I think he was trying to hit one of the flight attendant with wine bottle, and one other flight attendant smashed an entire wine bottle. Wine bottle guy with a glass wine bottle on his head, and that didn't deter him. He was still freaking trying to open the door. The lever was at half of its position. Of course, at that point, if it had been slightly up, the pilot would have gotten the signal immediately, I think. And they say that at the altitude they were in, the door could have still opened, because if you do that like at high cruising altitude, because of the differential, there's no way the door actually opens. But that at where they were, it could have opened. But the thing is, what in the name of God was this guy thinking? It seems that he was completely out of his head. I don't know if it was terrorism. I don't know if it was just... At some point he says, when one of the flight attendants tries to subdue him, he says, "Do you know who I am?" I say, why? You're trying to open a door? What? We were exchanging, Alex and I, when that was happening. I mean, just after it happened, and I think you were in agreement that if I had been seated in the front of the cabin, because it happened right in the front, I would have gotten there and hit with anything I got to just make him not open the door.
Yeah, absolutely, because
that was what happened. Basically, a lot of passengers went there, hence the brawl, the melee. It's almost like rugby. And
and I guess, I mean, there's something clearly wrong with this guy, because they zip tied him to a wheelchair to get him off the plane, and I guess as they were going through the terminal, he was flipping out and literally like flipped the wheelchair over and was screaming and everything. So there's something clearly. You hope the guy gets the help he needs. But, the maximum penalty for something like this is 20 years in jail and $250,000 fine. Wow. I mean, they're not going to do that, but this is a hell of a story, and the pictures are just staggering.
I don't know if we'll ever know why that guy would do that. Maybe he was mentally ill, or maybe it was an act of terrorism. I don't know, but there's something clearly wrong with the guy.
I don't think it was terrorism, but whatever it was, is pretty terrifying.
Do you think, though, that the person who gave him this buddy pass has any kind of responsibility?
There is. I mean, I don't know what
do you think?
What Delta is like, but certainly in my experience as an airline employee, when you have these buddy passes, it's not just implied. There's an explicit extension of your own responsibility and culpability when you give these passages to somebody that they are representing you, and you will hear about it if they cause any problems. And I think there was a lot of chatter in some of the forums that there's been a lot of airlines looking at these pass systems, and that this could be a privilege that's removed from employees if people abuse them or incidents like this happen.
Okay. Wow. Why, my God. I mean, honestly, I don't know how I would have reacted if I were a passenger. As I said before, I don't know what my gut would have told me. I would have tried to subdue him by all means possible. And I'm not someone violent or anything, but I mean, this is...
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Wow. Anyway, we'll go to the airport because there were a lot of news we wanted to cover, but obviously since we are recording in a slightly reduced space these days, so we're giving you another episode that is slightly longer because God knows when we're going to be able to record the next one, because by the time I come back from my trips in Hong Kong and Manila, I think Alex is in LA, which will also again push the recording for the episode by a little bit, so we apologize guys in advance that we're not recording at the same pace. So Incheon, I went to Incheon. It was a very last minute decision. I was basically invited to give an opening talk at a conference where former President Obama was talking. So my God, it was, I was like, oh my God, which was pretty cool to see him actually very close. He was 2 tables in front of me and then gave a speech. It was also like the former Prime Minister of the UK, David Cameron, former Prime Minister of Japan. There were like really a lot of big shots. Anyway, this is why I didn't choose the flight. The company that invited me chose that 747-8, and I'm very grateful to them because they couldn't have chosen better. I was like, really? Oh, of course I'm going to fly the 747-8. Anyway, I've been to Incheon a few times. I don't think you've ever been, Alex, right? So when I used to live in Japan, I was going there because it's only like an hour and 30 minutes flight. So it's a nice weekend destination if you want. It was one of the international flights that you could take from Haneda, actually, before Haneda opened up way more to international flights as they do now. It's a fantastic airport. It has been voted many, many times over the world's best airport by various awards. It always competes with, of course, Changi, Singapore, and Hong Kong Airport. These 3 names always, are the top 3, and sometimes they switch order. There's a reason for that. It's really a fantastic airport. It was built quite recently, actually. It's not a very old airport. It's in the northwest of the city, which is also a huge, huge city, obviously, Seoul, because the old airport, in brackets, Gimpo, was reaching capacity and had an issue to expand. So they built that thing. It is a bit far from the city. It took me, I think, at least an hour by car to get there every single time. There are trains to get there, but it's a bit far out. But in terms of efficiency, it is absolutely super efficient. It's very grand. There's a lot of air and room, very light as well. There's good vibes when you're in this airport. You don't feel cramped. You don't feel like overwhelmed by the structure. So that's something that works very well for it. It's also super well organized. You'd expect that, obviously, from South Korea, obviously, but it gives out a sense of security and that everything will be okay, and I'll make my flight, I'll make immigration super fast, which, by the way, is also super fast. In terms of passenger experience, something very interesting that a lot of airports should think about. It's not bulletproof, but it's interesting. You have, Alex, of course, you have passports from the UK, from the US, so by default, your language is English. But let's say if you had a French passport, when you arrive at immigration and you put your passport in, the machine, there's a person in front of you, you have to put in the machine. The language setting of the machine changes according to the nationality.
Small but cool.
Yeah. Obviously, for me, always, because as a Swiss, I'm using always my Swiss passport. It was displaying me German, and obviously I speak French. But that's how I reacted. I was like, "Why is it in German?" Oh, because my passport is Swiss, which is fine. I can read it and speak German, but still, it's an interesting tidbit. But it's one of these little things that help soothe this old anxiety of going through immigration, for instance. That was super efficient.
That's a nice touch.
There are 3 runways. There's basically one big fat terminal called Terminal 1. They're building Terminal 2, which will relocate for, I think, Air France and parts of SkyTeam will be there. But right now there's one big, and it's really big. It's pretty easy to navigate. The lounges, so I've experienced, I think I mentioned obviously last year when I was connecting at Etihad with Asiana, which is the other big airline from South Korea. I experienced their lounges. They were very cool. For this time, I experienced Korean Air Lounge, the Prestige, which is their business class lounge. It was my second time there. It's a very, very nice lounge as well. It has another benefit. It has views over basically the entire apron,
nice.
and 2 of the runways. So these are the kind of things, that helps this feeling of airiness I was mentioning. You always seem to be looking outside pretty much anywhere you're in the airport, which gives a sense of hominess to the airport. I don't know how to describe that. And the one thing that, since Incheon, which is a city separated from Seoul, actually, the one thing that the government is doing, and we had mentioned that as well, I think at least a year ago as well, that Incheon is building an entire city next to the airport. They want the airport to become a destination. They want to have, of course, entertainment. They want to have, the movies and malls, and they want people to go there just for the sake of actually going there, not only to just separate the airport. This is a bit of the idea that we see in Singapore. Yeah. They're currently building this massive thing in the middle, and also something that they are thinking of at Hong Kong. Again, these 3 airports are always in the top 3 for a reason. They're always thinking ahead of what can we do to make these airports more attractive and easier for passengers. So yeah, it is a fantastic airport. The one quirk, obviously, is that I was in Korea when the missiles test by the guy up north. So there was a bit of tension, obviously, and it's not there, but so still at the back of your mind. And interestingly, Incheon is actually super close to the border of North Korea.
Yeah, it's slightly disturbing when they do something like that.
Yeah, and when you take off, I think I was taking off for 1634, one of the runways. When you take off, you can see that Korean Air, and I know that some airlines go through North Korea, but Korean Air made quite a good detour.
Yeah, I bet they did.
To avoid North Korea. That was pretty visible on the flight path you have on your moving map. I was like, okay, well, there's clearly you're doing that for a reason, right? Well, and the airport, it keeps expanding. I think by the end of 2020, it should have 5 runways instead of 3. See at the speed they're going, and we still don't have a 3rd runway at Heathrow. Terminal 2 is opening this year, the end of this year. They will expand. Terminal 1, which should be called Main Terminal, I don't know, they're renaming the thing, but it will really become a massive hub. It is already a massive hub, by the way. When it started operations in 2001, it had less than 15 million passengers a year, and I think it's now reaching 60 million passengers a year. So you can see that there's an expansion. And of course, because it's a few months before, you'll probably see a lot of images and hear a lot about Incheon, because they have the Winter Olympics coming up.
Of course.
And I'm probably sure that a lot of the flights, if you go there, you'll be actually going through Incheon. You can go through Gimpo. I've actually never done that airport, so I cannot compare. But apparently, from what I hear, Gimpo is not that much closer, slightly, but it's less convenient in terms of that big, airy, and good homey feeling. So that's my last question, would I do a layover here? Yeah, obviously. I would actually have done layovers of 6 hours, and it was fantastic. But if you have that amount of time, you can just go to Seoul, just enjoy some great Korean barbecue. And my God, it's spicy, but it's so good.
Well, that's it. I'm sold. I'm going.
And Alex, so I don't know when we will be able to talk next. So you're flying next to LA, am I correct?
Next week, yep, to LA, and then at the beginning of next month to Boston. I don't have anything planned in between, but you never know where the wind will take me, so who knows?
How are you flying to LA?
Southwest from Oakland, very early in the morning.
Nice. Well, that will be a piece of news you're going to be telling us next time we record. Guys, slightly longer episode. We don't know when we will record back. I'll have more news about Hong Kong and Manila. And even probably if Alex is in LA, we can record about Singapore and Bangkok, which are my 2 other destinations for this month. So lots of other words to say in the next show. And until then,
safe travels, guys.